Before the gowns, before the corsets, there was the story beneath the fabric, a story stitched together with threads of identity, modesty, and quiet endurance. In the 1600s, what a woman wore wasn't just about fashion. It was about her place in the world. Every layer she wrapped herself in told a story. The chemise, the corset, the farthingale, each was both protection and prison. And under all those folds of silk or linen, there was a heart that beat with dreams, doubts, and defiance. This was an era when appearances meant everything. Clothing could whisper of wealth or scream of poverty. It could conceal strength or expose vulnerability. And for women especially, it was both armor and cage. The 1600s, a time of transformation. Europe stood at a crossroads between medieval modesty and the blossoming confidence of the Renaissance. Monarchs ruled by divine right, and the church held sway over daily life. In the grand palaces of France, England, and Spain, fashion became a language, a way to display loyalty, faith, and social rank without ever saying a word. But beneath the glamour of the noble courts, life told a very different story. The average woman, whether she was a peasant tending fields or a merchant's wife keeping accounts, lived her life within invisible boundaries. She had little say in politics, few rights over property, and almost no control over her own image. Her body was expected to move, sit, and even breathe according to rules she didn't create.
To understand women of the 1600s, we have to look at what lay hidden, the layers beneath their gowns, and the expectations beneath their lives. A corset wasn't just a garment. It was a symbol of discipline, of virtue, of submission to beauty and to society. And yet within those same tight-laced frames, countless women found quiet ways to express themselves through embroidery, color, or the simple act of wearing something fine on an ordinary day. For noble women, clothing was a performance. Every lace trim and pearl button was calculated to impress, to reflect her husband's wealth or her family's power. Dressing wasn't a matter of comfort, but of social survival. The more elaborate her layers, the more respect she commanded. But that luxury came at a cost: time, discomfort, and a constant reminder that her value was often judged by how gracefully she endured it. For working women, the story was simpler but no less powerful. Their undergarments were practical, lighter, looser, built for labor. Yet even they carried the same silent code, modesty above all. A woman's body was to remain unseen, her strength unacknowledged. It's easy to look back and see the corset as just a symbol of oppression, and yes, in many ways it was. But it was also a tool of identity. In an age when women were told what to believe, what to wear, and how to live, fashion became one of the few places they could still make choices, however small. Choosing a fabric, a color, a stitch, it was a whisper of independence. In candlelit rooms and smoky cottages, women created garments not just for beauty, but for meaning. Their hands wove the same question through every thread. Who am I beneath all this? Today we often measure history by kings, wars, and inventions. But the truer story lies in what was hidden, in the silent rituals of daily life, in the dressing rooms and sewing circles where women quietly shaped their world. The 1600s weren't just a century of corsets and lace. They were a century of resilience, of adaptation, of countless women holding their lives together, literally and figuratively, with thread and determination. And so before we lift the gowns and study the fabric, we must remember these were not just garments. They were confessions. Every pleat, every ribbon, every stitch carried the weight of a woman's place in her world and the spark of who she longed to become.
In the 1600s, a woman's clothing did more than cover her. It revealed her rank before she ever spoke. Clothing wasn't just fashion, it was a code of class, wealth, and virtue. The gown, the fabric, the lace, all became symbols of where she stood in a world built on hierarchy. Among nobles, clothing was an art of dominance. Every dress followed royal codes and was crafted from silk, velvet, or satin imported from Italy and France. Undergarments were strict. Corsets, farthingales, and heavy skirts shaped the ideal silhouette of power and control. These garments required servants to lace and prepare, reminding every woman that beauty and comfort rarely walk together. Each stitch reinforced her family's wealth, each jewel her husband's influence. Merchant wives stood between luxury and labor. Their clothing balanced elegance with practicality. Fine linen and wool for daily wear, silk only for special moments. Their corsets were lighter, often handmade. They dressed to project respectability and discipline, managing homes, trade accounts, and reputation all at once. Their attire spoke of ambition, modesty, and quiet pride. For peasant women, clothing meant survival. Their world was the soil, the barn, and the field. They wore coarse linen or wool, simple and durable, cut for freedom of movement. Undergarments were minimal. A chemise, sometimes a petticoat, no luxury, no lace. Their dresses bore the scent of earth, smoke, and sweat, the marks of endurance. Beauty came not from design, but from strength. Comfort fabric was the true border between classes. Silk was power, linen was respectability, and wool was survival. Comfort itself became a privilege. Nobles wore constrictive garments as a show of refinement, while peasants wore breathable cloth to endure long days. Even undergarments told the story, rigid whalebone corsets above, loose chemises below. Every thread whispered who you were allowed to be. Across Europe, fashion reflected both geography and belief. France dazzled under Louis XIII. Lace, ruffles, and color ruled the court. England, under Puritan influence, favored restraint, darker hues, modest cuts. Spain remained severe and pious, its nobility robed in black. In colder northern lands, practicality triumphed in layers of wool. Every region spoke the same silent truth. Wealth wore complexity, poverty wore necessity. Every stitch carried moral weight. Modesty, humility, obedience, all displayed through fabric. Laws even forbade lower classes from wearing noble colors or fabrics. Women could read each other's status from lace, cut, or dye. A brighter shade or finer trim could spark gossip or admiration. Clothing was both a language of aspiration and a chain of control. Yet beneath those divides, all women shared the same ritual, the act of dressing each morning. Whether noble or peasant, they began with the same simple chemise against their skin, each adjusted, laced, and tied with care, preparing to face the world that measured them by appearance. In this shared act of preparation, they found unity, the universal rhythm of womanhood. In a world measured by thread and lace, a woman's worth was stitched into what she wore. Yet her spirit often lay hidden beneath it. Beneath those gowns, both grand and humble, lived the true architecture of womanhood, the undergarments that shaped not only the body, but the story itself. Beneath every elegant gown of the 1600s was an invisible world of structure, shape, and sacrifice. These layers
were the foundation of beauty and the unseen burden of expectation. They sculpted not just the body, but society's vision of what a woman should be. The chemise was the most intimate garment, a simple linen shift worn closest to the skin. It protected the outer clothes from sweat and oil, absorbing daily life's realities. Though plain, it carried dignity. For many women, this was their only true comfort. The fabric was soft, breathable, and often handmade. For noble women, it might be edged with lace. For peasants, it was coarse and functional. Yet, in this shared garment, every woman began her day the same way, wrapped in simplicity before the world demanded complexity. Next came the stays, the 17th century version of the corset. Made of whalebone or stiff reeds, it shaped the torso into the fashionable conical form. Straight spine, high chest, narrow waist. To wear it was to surrender comfort for form. Servants pulled the laces tight each morning, creating a rigid posture that symbolized discipline and control. For noble women, this rigidity was elegance. For working women, it was often unnecessary restraint. Still, the corset embodied the era's deeper truth. The body was to be managed, molded, and made proper. The farthingale and bum roll fashion demanded shape, and structure demanded tools. Beneath grand skirts lay the farthingale, a cage-like frame of hoops that widened the hips and lifted the gown into grandeur. For some, it was a mark of majesty, for others, a daily obstacle. Later came the bum roll, a padded ring tied around the waist to exaggerate the curve of the hips. These frames transformed women into moving sculptures of status. Every inch of volume spoke of privilege. The more cumbersome the gown, the less one had to labor. Over the frames came the petticoat, a soft yet structured layer of cloth. Sometimes plain, sometimes embroidered, it concealed the harsh lines of the understructure. For wealthier women, multiple petticoat added warmth and elegance. For poorer ones, a single layer was enough to serve as both skirt and comfort. Petticoats were often hand-dyed in gentle hues, rose, ivory, or muted blue. Hidden beauty meant only for the wearer herself. For most noble women, dressing was not a private act. Maids and attendants were required to lace, tie, and adjust each layer. A woman could not easily dress or undress herself. The process was ceremonial. Layers of linen, stays, padding, and gown. Each morning she was constructed. For peasants, the ritual was simpler, but no less significant. Their underlayers were minimal, designed for movement and endurance. Yet the symbolism remained. Each layer marked the day's duties and limits. These garments were both armor and prison. They symbolized how society sought to shape women's appearance and behavior alike. Tight laces mirrored social restraint. Heavy skirts mirrored social weight. The female form was admired, but only when contained. Freedom of movement meant moral suspicion. Restraint meant virtue. The physical compression of stays became a metaphor for the social compression of expectation. Despite their discomfort, undergarments were deeply personal. Women embroidered initials on the inner seams of their chemises, marking identity in a world that often denied it. The act of dressing, though guided by rules, was also an act of self-recognition, a moment between skin and society. Even among the nobility, where garments were designed by others, a woman's chemise remained her own. The feel of familiar linen against the skin was a quiet reminder of autonomy beneath layers of control. Over the century, undergarments evolved with changing ideals. The farthingale shrank, stays softened, silhouettes shifted. But the purpose remained: to define, to constrain, to project. The 1600s shaped not only fashion, but the very language of femininity. Beauty through restriction, elegance through endurance. The architecture of expectation. To uncover these layers is to uncover truth. The undergarments of the 1600s were not merely clothing. They were blueprints of a culture that built femininity from the inside out. Every tie, lace, and hoop carried both pride and pressure. Beneath silk and lace lay strength, patience, and silent rebellion. Because even when the world dictated the shape of her body, the woman within still found ways to breathe, to move, to exist, and in quiet defiance to endure. Behind every pearl, every ribbon, and every carefully pinned curl lay the weight of expectation. A woman's life in the 1600s was a performance of grace, one choreographed by society, faith, and family. Her appearance was her script, her clothing, the costume she could never take off. Beneath the charm of refinement lived the quiet endurance of constraint. Each morning began not with freedom, but with duty. A noble woman was laced, tied, and adorned by others, her movements measured, her posture dictated. A merchant's wife rose early to manage her household, supervise servants, and maintain appearances of respectability. A peasant woman, already calloused by work, tied her chemise and stepped into the field before sunrise. Different garments, same rhythm: serve, endure, repeat. From birth, girls were raised to become obedient wives, silent pillars of domestic virtue. Clothing reflected this expectation: the modest neckline, the bound waist, the subdued colors, all symbols of chastity and restraint. Love was rarely the goal. Alliance, stability, and reputation came first. Even in noble courts, women were often displayed like fine fabric, chosen for beauty, lineage, and fertility. Their garments whispered loyalty, not liberty. Within grand halls and humble cottages alike, the rhythm of domestic life never ceased. Women spun thread, mended clothes, prepared food, and raised children. For noble women, embroidery replaced labor, delicate, endless stitching that echoed confinement. For peasants, it was survival, work that left the body aching, but the family fed. Every stitch, every meal, every breath of service kept the household alive, even as their own dreams often faded into silence. The 1600s ideal of beauty was not kind. Corsets deformed ribs, restricted breathing, and caused fainting. Heavy skirts and multiple layers of fabric trapped heat and limited movement. Lead-based powders and perfumes masked natural scent but poisoned the skin. A woman's body became both canvas and cage, decorated to perfection, constrained to exhaustion. Yet, to appear effortless was the cruelest expectation of all. Every gesture, glance, and color spoke volumes. A woman's worth was measured by how well she obeyed the visual codes of virtue. A neckline too low brought scandal. A laugh too loud invited shame. The world became a mirror that judged her constantly, one she could never look away from. Clothing became armor against gossip, a moral disguise for survival. The invisible chains of class freedom was not distributed equally. Noble women were confined by reputation, peasant women by necessity. A noble woman might be trapped in silk and ceremony, a farmer's wife in mud and exhaustion. Yet both carried invisible chains. The demand to serve others before themselves. Luxury did not mean liberty. Poverty did not mean simplicity. Both were prisons of their own kind. She wakes before dawn. The chamber is cold. Her maid enters silently, pulling the laces tight. The sound of whalebone creaks like a sigh. Noon. She greets guests with practiced smiles, her face powdered, her spine straight. Her breath shallow, her heart calm. The conversation circles around fashion, marriage, and propriety. Night. When the candles burned low, she finally loosens her corset alone. The red marks on her skin are not from pain, but from presence, proof that she existed within the mold she was given. The spiritual gown religion wove itself into every fold of womanhood. Modesty was preached as virtue and obedience as salvation. The church dictated not only behavior, but appearance. Dark gowns for humility, covered hair for purity. Even queens knelt beneath moral codes written by men. For many, faith offered solace. For others, submission. In either case, the divine and domestic became one continuous act of devotion, the seeds of change. Yet within the silence, defiance grew. A slightly looser corset, a brighter ribbon, a private diary. These were small rebellions, but they mattered. Women began to write, to observe, to question, often in whispers, sometimes in ink. Beneath layers of lace and linen, they nurtured thought. And though the world saw only obedience, history would later uncover the truth. Their endurance was not weakness, but quiet resistance. The measured breath of womanhood, the women of the 1600s carried the weight of beauty, duty, and belief upon their shoulders, and still they moved with grace. Beneath corsets and crowns, aprons and calluses, they bore the silent strength that built the foundation of modern womanhood. Every breath taken against the pull of the corset was an act of courage. Every day survived was an act of will. Centuries have passed, yet every thread tells the same story of women shaping the world in silence, in style, and in strength. What began as corsets and collars became statements of rebellion and freedom. Each gown, each stitch, each hidden sigh was a quiet declaration. I exist. The struggle woven into the fabric of the 1600s still lingers in mirrors today. Modern women, though unbound by whalebone and lace, still battle the weight of expectation, the demand to look, to fit, to please. But now the choice belongs to them. The needle is in their hands. Fashion has become more than cloth. It's become a voice, soft, fierce, and unapologetically feminine. The same resilience that once held up heavy skirts now carries the world forward in high heels, sneakers, or barefoot defiance. So when we trace the threads from past to present, we find not a history of fabric, but a history of freedom. The gowns may have fallen away, but the spirit remains, poised, powerful, and everlasting.